Hello, amazing parents and caretakers, and welcome to the Pumped Up Parenting Podcast. I'm your family empowerment coach, Celia Kibler. I'm a mom of a blended family of 5 kids. I'm a grandma of 9 kids, an author, a teacher, a speaker, and a consultant with over 40 years of training and real-life parenting experience. I'm here to offer you practical, doable tips, strategies, and techniques that will pump up your parenting skills and create peace, love, and laughter throughout your family. In addition, I'll be interviewing some great humans that are on a mission to make your life a better, happier, and healthier life. So let's not waste any time and get started with the next episode of the Pumped Up Parenting Podcast. Thanks for listening. Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Pumped Up Parenting Podcast. I'm excited to talk math today, and I'm not usually excited to talk about math, but I'm excited to talk about math because my guest has figured out how to make learning math easier. That's what I said, like easier, like not the nightmare that so many people, including me, have viewed math. I had a father who was like a math whiz, and he could not understand why me and my siblings, not all my siblings, but me, my mom, why we didn't get it. That's what he's like, why don't you get it? And I'm like, I don't know, I just don't get it. So I decided to bring in Dr. Aditya because he gets it. And he wrote books about it so that your kids can get it and you can get it. And isn't it nice not to have this horrible, like, math lurking over their school and their time and you and all of that, because that's what happens with math so often. So I'd like to introduce you to our guest, Dr. Aditya Nagrath, and he is the founder of Elephant Learning and the author of these 2 great math books that we're going to talk about today. So Aditya, welcome so much to the Pumped Up Parenting Podcast.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
I'm excited to have you here. So first I want to address, because we have a lot of things to talk about, but I want to address, like, why is math thing, this like, this instant fear? It's somehow, somewhere along the way, it becomes a fear of schooling.
Yeah. Well, so when I got started with Elephant Learning, what I learned was that 4 out of 5 students start kindergarten unprepared for the kindergarten curriculum. And that begs the question as to where does the kindergarten curriculum start? And it starts with counting to 20, and the prerequisite is that students are able to count to 10. And the challenge is that when you or I say that, before I started this thing, I'd say, yeah, it's saying the numbers out loud 1 through 10. But when you do that, you could just be saying the words. So that's when your child is just saying things and they don't really know what it means. And what kindergarten thinks counting to 10 is give me 10 things, and the student is able to slide over 10 things and stop on 10. And so, like, as it turns out, there's a lot of research already done on how could we teach mathematics as a language. They call it conceptual mathematics. And the challenge is that if you don't get it coming into kindergarten, so those 4 out of 5 students, there doesn't tend to be a lot of catch up for whatever reason. Like, on the one hand, we don't tend to hold students back until 3rd grade. I said that once in California, and I was told, we don't hold students back at all here. And then that ends up with these situations. So the data shows that on average, students in low-income neighborhoods are 3 years behind their funded peers. So what that means then is that you have a 3rd grade teacher trying to teach multiplication to a student whose understanding of numbers rivals a kindergartner. And that's an impossible situation for both the teacher and the student. And it's now natural that anxiety is going to form because how do you overcome this gap?
Right. And I feel like math is one of those things that builds upon the previous learning. So if you're not learning the basics, how are you moving forward? How can you just jump into algebra or geometry or calculus or whatever if you haven't even learned the basic formulas of math in a simple way?
Yeah, that's the main challenge, right? Because multiplication is defined as repeated addition. And so like understanding what multiplication is when your understanding of numbers rivals the kindergartner, right? So you're having a tough time saying this is 10 and handing someone 10 things, and you're being asked to try to understand multiplication. What strategy are you going to use? You're going to use memorization. You're going to memorize your multiplication tables. And the biggest challenge with that then is that like we define understanding multiplication. So the standards define understanding multiplication as you're kind of able to look at the world and then see a problem and then identify that, oh, multiplication is the solution, right? Like if I multiply these two numbers. So the thing is that if I memorize the multiplication tables and I don't have that, then the memorization was completely useless. I'm never going to use it. And that's what students end up saying out loud. When am I going to use this?
Right. They always say, I'll never use this. And the reality is you use it every day. Like when you
Yeah.
think about math and numbers, you use it every day. Somewhere it comes into play. I have a fitness company for kids I've had since 87, and I work with toddlers a lot. And one of the things we do in our toddler classes is we'll set up an obstacle course for them. And I'll explain to parents that this obstacle course is actually their first introduction to sequencing. So they go through a tunnel, through hoops, a balance beam, tunnel, hoops, a balance, like they go in that order and they learn sequencing through play because, of course, they learn so much through play. But it really shows how mathematics is key in so many things in the world. And I think students come out of school thinking, I'll never use this. Why? It's a waste of my time.
I think it's even more problematic than that because when you look at this data and you understand what it's really saying is that the cycle of poverty really boils down to this mathematics issue because almost all of the high-paying jobs, almost all of the high-paying careers, I mean, there are entrepreneurs out there right now. I don't need mathematics, and they're using it on a daily basis. You use algebra on a daily basis because it just depends on how you set up the problem ultimately, right? If you've already solved for X, then sure, it looks like addition, subtraction, and multiplication, right? But like the real challenge is this, right? I'll put it this way. I've been interviewed by Mr. Kevin Harrington, the guy from Shark Tank. And before we got on camera, what he said to me was, I was an ace at calculus, but can you tell me where do people use this on a daily basis? So I said, well, down on Wall Street, because when you're trading options, they call it derivative trading. And that's because the underlying instrument performs sort of like the idea from calculus. And that's the challenge, right? Like these money itself is this mathematical object that is a measure of value. And so you say, well, I'm never going to do more than addition and multiplication. And that's true if you don't seem to go further than that.
Exactly. And if you don't learn it. So, what makes elephant learning different? What makes your methods in these books remove the anxiety that so many people, not just students, have when you mention the word math?
Sure. So what we do is we teach the mathematics as a language. We took all of that early age education research and we combined it with advanced adaptive algorithms that when you combine them together becomes this system where it's like we feed you this activity, which is this experience, which is this play learning, right? Like, so they say, hey, children learn through play. And it's like, yeah, human beings learn through experiences. So like, if I do a project, that's better than you telling me about the project on the board. I'm going to really understand it because I did it, right? Versus whatever. And yeah, that's what it is. So if the kid is playing, they're having a full experience around the idea. And basically, we just keep building it up until they get to more advanced levels. So what we find is that on average, children in our system learn about 1.5 years of mathematics over the course of 10 weeks when they use it just 30 minutes per week. We've done a we've done a cross-sectional study on over 57,000 students. They used it on average 40 minutes a week, so they got a little bit more. They got 1.67 years
Amazing.
and 13 weeks. And we focus on the essential topics. So like the reason why is because the entire idea was, could we use this software to somehow plug that gap, right? So if you have that third grade teacher and you have that third grade student who's performing like a kindergartner, could we just give them the essential language so that they could participate in class? And that means that, like, okay, maybe we're not going to cover addition on a clock or addition with money, but if you understood the idea of addition, then these other ideas are attainable. But if you didn't really understand the idea of addition, then guess what? Like, you're adding a new abstract concept on top of this abstract concept, which is addition. It becomes really hard. It becomes very confusing. So, like, this is what makes all the other stuff possible, in the hopes that, yeah, when you're sitting in the classroom, you understand the teacher, you're able to participate. And the end result is that students say that mathematics is fun. So that's great. They might hate elephant learning, but they love math class. I consider that a win, because our only mission is to empower children with mathematics. And we also have a coaching program. So, like, our coaches are there to help parents. They're there to help students. They're there to help teachers. But we turned that coaching program into this wonderful book that we're hopefully going to talk about soon.
And I love it because, I know, like I mentioned my dad earlier, and he's no longer with us, but he was a math whiz. And the interesting thing is, from what you say, it, making it playful, things like that, is he would always tell us it's a game. It is a game. Math is a game. I see numbers and I see a game, and I'd be like stressed out. And I'm like, I see numbers and I'm terrified. And he's like, but it's all a game. And it was like, a challenge. My younger brother's the same way. He saw it all as a game. And so many people see it as scary and stressful, and they don't see that play in it.
Yeah, I mean, so, like, the challenge is this, and this is one of the things we talk about in the book, which is that, like, the way I like to explain it is this, is that, like, when they designed the AI systems, the current AI stuff that we're looking at today, actually, what it boiled down to was that you have inputs, you have a function, you have outputs, and you have a training function. And the training function alters the function so that the inputs map to the outputs. And the hope is that the continuity of the F makes some similar inputs go to similar outputs. So for the human being, if you kind of look at what that would be, at least on the input side, it would be our experiences. And then after that, we get to choose the meaning that we add to those experiences. And then from there, we react or we respond, or there's thought. So, like, we're doing a little bit more than what AI is doing, but a good definition for intelligence for the 1979 crowd, because it's like, hey, we don't have machines that learn. So, like, machines that just learn things, that would be intelligent. And when it comes down to mathematics, when it comes down to reading, when it comes down to basketball, soccer, piano, karate, it doesn't matter what it is. It boils down to the meaning being I can or I can't. And the reality is that, like, whatever the student is trending towards then becomes their story about themselves. Exactly. And from there, they start providing reasons for it, because there's no reason for it, right? Like, I mean, that's ultimately the thing, is this statement, I can do math, I can't do math. It's neither true or false. And so, like, these training functions would have a hard time training, is what it boils down to. Like, if I tried to train this into an AI system, I might have a very confused AI system. I might not be afraid, because I don't know if it has emotions, but it'd be confused. And basically the advice is we have to keep the student on the I believe side of that. And we have to start to take the reasons that they're using to justify I can't, and we have to start to dissuade them. So, like, one of the most common ones is I can't, I'm stupid. I can't, I'm not a numbers person. I can't, I'm not, right? Like, it's just not me, right? Like, it's me.
People say it all that I'm bad at math. I say it all the time, and all the time when I say I'm not good at math. And then I think to myself, why am I saying that?
Exactly, right? But like that,
all that self-talk.
It becomes self-reinforcing, because then you end up proving to yourself that you can't do it.
Right. Because that's what the subconscious mind does. You tell it something and it works to prove it true.
That's what's happening. Yeah. So the thing is this, with basketball or soccer or piano, well, guess what? There's something else they could be doing. I could play the violin. I could take up beach volleyball. That was just on the Olympics out in the TV out there. But with math, with reading, that's it. that's the game. If you want to be a functional human being, then you have to have the reading, you have to have the math. And I believe you have to have it through algebra, because the third grade reading standard that they have out there is because, hey, like the average American speaks at the third grade reading level. So you can talk with just about anyone if you get the third grade reading. But the challenge is that you can't read any texts that include mathematics. I'm not going to say on mathematics, that include mathematics, if you haven't got through algebra, because that's where we introduce variables and functions and etc. So now if you want to read any scientific text, right, whether it's introductions to physics, introductions to chemistry, introduction to biology, it has that basic math in it. And so this is sort of the thing, is that like if you don't get to that point, then yeah, this other stuff is also scary. And that's what we see, is that 69% of STEM majors, and that's a 2007 stat, it's probably higher now. 69% of STEM majors switch to a major with less mathematics. 75% of high school students are not proficient in high school mathematics, which makes you worry about that 6 or 7% difference.
Yeah.
And yeah, so like
because you'll keep away. I remember when I went to college, I wanted to avoid math. Well, math is like a core requirement. So I found this class that was human ecology. I think that's what it was called. And it was under a math requirement. And I was like, oh, this will be a breeze, because I didn't know what I thought it was about. It was the single hardest class I took in 4 years of college, because what I didn't realize, it was under the heading of agriculture and resource economics. So it was an economics class.
Economics class.
Which made
so then there's a whole bunch
ace
of language,
micro and macroeconomics when I went to take it.
Oh,
but
okay, cool. Yeah.
It was a hard class.
It was an intro class, though.
That was my first thought.
Yeah.
Avoid math at all costs.
But like the thing that I learned is that now then all human language kind of boils down the same way as mathematics. And it might be a little bit more complicated, and mainly because human beings don't agree upon the definition, even though we got a dictionary. It's like, yeah, but that was invented at some point too in the 1800s. I think Mel Gibson was in a movie. But like one time I was trying to tell my kid a joke. Like my wife told me, go tell him this thing. I'm like, yeah, this is not happening. So I go, I'm just her ambassador. Like, you're gonna have to deal with mama on this one. And he goes, what's an ambassador? And I start working backwards. Am I gonna be able to explain this? And I'm like, I don't got this one. Like, I'm gonna have to explain what a government is. I'm gonna, like, it's gone, right? Like, so just give up on the 4-year-old at this point.
Right. We was 4. Hi, this is Celia, your host and family and relationship empowerment coach, and mom and grandma, here to take a break from this podcast to give you a special opportunity. As parents, we all have those moments. The pressure builds up, the noise gets too much, and before we know it, we're raising our voices higher than we ever intended. But what if there was a better way? Introducing 21 Days to Stop Yelling at Your Kids, a revolutionary program designed to help you communicate with your children without yelling. Imagine a home filled with understanding and respect, where your words have impact without the need to raise your voice. Created through my over 40 years of experience, this course offers you practical, easy to implement strategies that work in real life. You'll learn through interactive lessons, engaging exercises, and a supportive community. No judgments, just guidance. Because being a parent doesn't have to mean you're perfect. It's about growing, and it's about becoming intentional. In just 21 days, life will be calmer and more harmonious. What if you don't get the course? Where will you be in 21 days? Still feeling like a bad parent? I encourage you to join the millions of parents that I have helped who have found a new path to communication and connection. Visit quityelling.com to enroll in the 21 Days to Stop Yelling course today. And for our podcast listeners, use the code PODCAST for a 60% discount. quitYelling.com, because love speaks so much louder than yelling. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to seeing you on the other side. Well, it's like, in your book, so this book is called Treating Mathematics Anxiety. It's so spot on because that's what it is. It's anxiety, like over the thought of having to do math. And you give you talked a lot about sports. You give a basketball analogy in here. And
it's the main analogy. Sorry, not the analogy.
No,
the
because I was going
anxiety.
to ask you kind of talk about that a little bit.
Well, let's talk about the basketball analogy. But the anxiety, sorry, you said I heard analogy and messed up there. The main anxiety that human beings have is, what is the meaning, right? So like we're experiencing the input, but we don't know the meaning to add. And for children, I mean, it's the adults that are adding the context. And actually, this is a good intro to the basketball analogy, right? Because I like to look at basketball a lot of times now when I'm coaching students with mathematics. And the reason why is because basketball and mathematics are the same in that anyone can look and see, did the ball go in the hoop or not? And it's very black and white. The ball either went in or it didn't go in. Now, when you start to look at the similarities and differences between basketball and mathematics, you do learn a lot. So like a moment ago, we said like, hey, there are no other games. That's one of the differences, right? For mathematics, there is no other game. So we have to keep trying. We have to keep coaching. We have to keep going. We have to keep them on the I can do this side of the thing. And one of the main ways I like to do that is I like to point out that the ball doesn't always go in basketball. In fact, if it's going in 80% of the time, you're either really close to the hoop or you're really, really, really good. So so like that's not the threshold necessarily for mathematics either, right? Like we're looking for 80, 90, 95% proficiency, especially like in older topics. It's like, well, you're a sixth grader now, you should be able to add with nearly 100% proficiency. This is sort of the thing, is that like as a coach, it's about me helping you to get the ball into the hoop, not necessarily like in the shot that just passed, but in the shot that's about to go in. Right. So the shot that you're about to take. And so like that's another thing in the book about the basketball analogy, is this idea of next shot. And I got this from the Netflix movie Hustle, actually, because in the movie, Adam Sandler is this basketball coach. And he says, for the basketball coach, it's not about this shot, it's about the next shot. That's what they're paying me for. And that's what it is, right? If you keep your mindset as the coach on, it's about the next shot, it's not about this shot, then guess what? You don't have any of the quote unquote pain that comes from the ball not going in yourself, because you're focused on your job of the next shot.
Right.
But that is the other half of the anxiety, which is in the movie, Adam Sandler is this basketball coach. And he says, for the basketball coach, it's not about this shot, it's about the next shot. That's what they're paying me for. And that's what it is, right? If you keep your mindset as the coach on, it's about the next shot, it's not about this shot, then guess what? You don't have any of the quote unquote pain that comes from the ball not going in yourself, because you're focused on your job of the next shot.
Right.
But that is the other half of the anxiety, which is wrong has this meaning to it, which is emotional. It's emotional because, again, like children don't learn language from the dictionary. They learn it from inference. They learn it through these experiences. And so there's a lot of tied to lots of words, and wrong, bad.
Right.
Yeah, straight up. So,
and it's the way they're parented, and their mistakes are viewed, their failures are viewed, I try to help parents with understanding that the opposite of success is not failure. The opposite of success is giving up.
Yeah.
That's the opposite. Failure, mistakes, that's on your way to success. Like you say, the next shot, if it didn't work out this time, well, let's focus on what's going to happen next. And what didn't happen for this not to work out. Like, let's look at the equation. Let's look at that. And that's a huge part of helping children understand that that's all part of learning and it's okay. Like you should celebrate mistakes, celebrate things that didn't work out because you're learning. You're
Yeah.
learning the next thing.
With mathematics, with reading, with all these things, is that there's a learning opportunity in every single shot. Whereas sometimes with basketball, you just shoot the ball and it just doesn't go in, and there's nothing to improve on.
Yeah. You know, another thing you talk about in the book is the whole mindset of villain, hero, that whole mindset of how we think of ourselves. I think a lot of that is brought on by competition. There's a lot of competition in schools. There's a lot of, the kids that can read really well because they get the really easy, they get these complicated books and they read right through them. And some kids struggle with like 5 words on a page, and then there's math. And like when I was growing up, I don't know if they still have those like multiplication timed tests, where it's like, do these 50 multiplication problems in 2 minutes. I think that's like my worst memory of school. You feel like, well, I can't do it. I'm not even able to be the victor of this story because I'm my own worst enemy, and I just believe I can't do it and no one's here to help me. And so what goes through all that when you're working with kids and taking care of that whole mindset of I can't do, there's no way I can do this and I'll never be the hero.
The main thing is to say to the student out loud, I believe you can do this. And the reason why is because when you do that, one, you've made a commitment to the student. That commitment is I'm going to be here until you do it. I believe you can do it. I'm going to help you do it. But if the student then stays with you, which, I mean, if you're the parent, they kind of got to. Implicitly back,
whether they want to or not.
Yeah. Implicitly, there's this commitment back to you, which is that, yeah, as long as I'm doing math with you, I'm going to try because you believe I can do it. They also now implicitly sort of believe they can do it. After that, right? I mean, there's a lot of tactics that we discuss in the book to where like you can help sort of influence it, right? And one of the main ones is to reflect prior success back to them. It doesn't matter what their level is. It's like, hey, look, you couldn't do this a minute ago, and now you can do it, right? So like, this is showing, right? So like, as we show the student their progress, they feel they're seeing their efforts are getting them further along. So now they start to believe also that they can do it. But yeah, these are like, but this is how the tactics end up working together.
Right. And I think the parents have to believe they can do it. So many parents from their own experience of like, well, there's just no one in this family good at math. Sorry, you've been handed a bum deal here. I can't do math. Your father can't do math. Your parent, the whole world, go down generations, terrible at math. So you're never going to be able to do it. And parents have to realize that putting that prejudgment out there is going to contradict them feeling and them believing in themselves because you're already predetermining
them reasons. You're helping them come up with the reasons to justify the I can't
and the excuses. Oh, well, I can't because they couldn't. They, no one in my family could.
That's the reason, right? Like, I mean, that's the deal is that like we still sort of are a logical machine, even though we're able to hold these false or unprovable ideas with us. We have to have the justification for it because even we have the question, maybe I could, right? But like, I don't think I can, right? From the coaching perspective, it's always about I can. And I think the parent can do it. I think that's the challenge is that like, we're talking about a very basic amount of jargon, and it's jargon that's so fundamental to humanity. We call it vocabulary. But for any job that anyone gets, they learn new jargon. And so that's the thing is that if you can take any job in the world and pick up the language to go and talk to the people in that company, well, then, yeah, I'm sure you can understand addition, subtraction, multiplication, fractions, and variables and functions.
Yep. It's another language. That's a good way to put it. So what piece of advice we have our listeners, and we could go on and talk about this forever, but you know, at some point we have to come to an end. But what piece of advice do you have for a parent who's listening and is thinking, I have spent the last 6 years struggling with my child. They refuse to do it. I can't get them to sit down with me and do math. Yeah, and I'm sure you come across this situation all the time. And it's like, this will never work. We've tried everything. That's never going to work.
Yeah. So the avoidance strategies are hard. And like, for example, some of the research out there says that like, if you say like, you can have activity B, if you do activity A, then activity A becomes work and activity B becomes the reward. And the way this might look is if you take out the trash, you get to watch TV. Now taking out the trash becomes work.
Right.
But the thing is that a lot of these things are inevitable to become work. So like we don't recommend that you don't do that. It's just we don't recommend that's your first strategy. But in the situation as you described it, like if the student is just completely avoidant, then what probably needs to happen is a meeting the student at their level of understanding, right? It could be that we're working on these materials that are way up here. They're starting to realize this is impossible because they don't understand anything you're saying. So we got to start to go back to, okay, here's where your level is. And that's actually what Elephant Learning helps with. We start with the placement exam. It starts about 2 years behind the students. That's how it's designed to do it, based on the age, right? Because we're trying to capture most of the human beings out there with it. And you're able to set it back. So if you know, like, hey, my student is further back. In fact, if you don't even know, like we've had students who are maybe in middle school that are have special needs, and they come in to our system and the parent puts them in the first grade exam, which basically tests them. Now what we're doing is we're starting with materials that should be, they should be confident with. And the feel is like a puzzle game. And the reason why is because it starts easy and it gets hard very quickly, right? That's the adaptation. And so like, once we've found their level of understanding, now we're feeding them puzzles right at that level of understanding. So like somehow the parent has to start to replicate that system, because that's like the most important part of like the two things that are necessary, right? Like you got to believe in the student, you got to meet them at their level of understanding. If you do those two things, you'll be able to treat math anxiety. But if you're only doing half, then it's not going to work.
It makes perfect sense, because so often kids get stuck because they don't know the basics of it. Like once they learn the base, they're like, oh, that's it. But sometimes I feel like schools move along so fast, they don't even give kids a chance to master the steps along the way. It's just like, okay, now we're going to this, and we didn't catch on to this.
Yeah, I mean, it's really challenging in a situation where it's 30-1 to gauge the understanding, right? Is when you speak with the student, you see, they're not using the language exactly right. That's when you start to say, okay, well, what do you think it means, right?
Right.
But if you're not doing that, and that's, it's hard to do in a classroom. It's hard to do with tests. It's hard to do, especially if you've got these standardized tests that you're like, well, we got to pass it. We got to get the score up. That's the goal. Get the score up in the standardized test. And yeah, that's the goal, right? But the methodology has to be through the understanding. The methodology has to be not through feeding them a mnemonic. Hey, now you can answer it correctly, so you can somehow cheat the ball into the hoop. That's another part of the basketball analogy, is that like with basketball, there's no way for you to shoot as the student. But with mathematics, we have all these other ways to help them put the ball in the hoop that kind of shortcut the throwing of the ball.
Right. It makes so much sense. And I feel like a lot of the people that are listening now are thinking, can this be true? Can I get my child past this? And it is true, because you told us this, the statistics of kids that are able to conquer this. So I'm sure people are thinking, well, where do I start? How do I reach you? Where do I get your books? Like, what's going on? So can you tell the people that are listening where they should begin? Do they reach out to you? Do they get your books, and where do they find them?
Well, so the books are available on Amazon and on Barnes and Nobles and forever, right? So like Treating Mathematics Anxiety, Inclusive Strategies for Working with Students Exhibiting Mathematics Anxiety. And the other book is called Rethinking Math Learning. But I really recommend the Treating Mathematics Anxiety book. And if you want to learn more about the software, you just go to elephantlearning.com. The book's also on there. So like if you end up on elephantlearning.com, you'll be able to find it. I hope we're able to help you. If you come find us, if you message support, if you ask us any questions, even if you leave a comment on one of our ads and it's just a question, we're happy to help you, right? Even if it's like, hey, my student's struggling with XYZ question, like, could you help us understand it? Like, we're just happy to help.
And that's the thing. The thing is to not prejudge, not assume, because like I said, with anything that we learn, we need to learn the basics. We need to build up. We need to get the steps in order so that we can stay consistent and we can master what we're trying to master. And if your kids get lost along the way, or you got lost along the way, you're going to feel it's impossible, but it's not impossible. And it's not impossible if you know where to look and where to get them help. And imagine how accomplished they're going to feel when all of a sudden they've always believed they were not so good at math, and now they're great at math. They're a genius at math, and they can now help other kids, help their friends, help you understand things. They're going to feel great. So reach out. It's right here. The book is here. It's easy to read. It's you can go through it. It's got little worksheets in it to help you understand better. Don't miss this opportunity. Your kids are going to go through either life believing in themselves or not. It's going to be pretty great to raise an adult who believes in themselves. Well, so much information, Aditya. Thank you so much for being here. And thank you for creating this program. Is there one more thing? I mean, we told people so much. Is there one last thing you'd like to tell before we sign off?
No, thank you for having me. I'm really happy that we were able to do this. And yeah, I mean, it is a lot of information. So like, I think the thing is like, let's start to digest it, right? Like if you go get the book, you just start out with the book and you decide that like, hey, like I want to look into the software. If you email our support the receipt for the book and say, hey, like I bought the book, and Dr. Graff promised me a scholarship because I listened to Pumped Up Parenting, then they will give you instructions and you'll get a discount on the software. Our only mission is to empower children with mathematics. That's the only thing I want to do is help. I have understood that if I can do this, there's always someone out there that'll pay me to do it. So it's not about the money for us.
It's so great. And I'm sure you feel so great with every child that crosses that line and takes mathematics like my dad takes it as a game. Oh, I can do this. It's easy. Well, thank you for creating this. I appreciate you being here on this podcast with me and sharing all your knowledge. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
It was a pleasure. And to all of you, if this helped you, you know others that are struggling in math, because we all know others that are struggling in math. Share this out with them. Share out the knowledge that you can get from Aditya, his company, Elephant Learning, his books, Treating Mathematics Anxiety. Why should your child have to live with that anxiety? If they had a broken arm, you would fix it. Well, this is like a broken math. You can fix it. So fix it. It's a book. It's a program. It's not like, going into like massive amounts of debt to do it. It's right here, and it can happen because it's happened for thousands upon thousands of other kids. So share this out, take advantage of it, and leave a comment if you enjoyed this for us and help spread the word. For all of you, I appreciate, as does Dr. Aditya, for taking time out of your busy day to listen to us. I know you have busy days, and we appreciate your time. I wish you all days filled with peace, love, tons of laughter. Make math funny. Math can be funny. Things are funny. Laugh more. Relax yourself. De-stress. And we'll see you here next time on the Pumped Up Parenting Podcast. Bye-bye, everyone. Thank you for listening to the Pumped Up Parenting Podcast. If this episode was helpful to you, please share it with a friend and leave us a review that will help others. Wonder why kids don't come with a manual? Well, wonder no more, because I wrote you one, and it's just won a wonderful Mom's Choice Award. Go to celiasbooks.com and buy your copy of Raising Happy Toddlers, as well as my children's books. I appreciate you being part of my mission to help 10 million parents stop yelling at their kids. Please be intentional and hug on those kids of yours. See you at the next episode.